Hello and welcome to episode 23 of Mad Knitting. Today is Friday, August 26, 2022. My name is Susan. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, where I live and work. If you've watched my channel before, you will notice a set change, if you will. I have noticed that if I am trying to make a video in the late afternoon at my dining room table, which is where I usually am, there's a lot of backlight and sometimes the projects don't show up very well and the yarn and stuff. So today I'm trying a different spot. I'm sitting on my piano bench, obviously in front of my piano, and there's some light coming in from the side. We'll see how that goes. I don't have any lights or microphones or other equipment because this is not a moneymaker for me. Maybe one of these days I'll look into getting one of those ring lights. I don't think they're very expensive, but I just haven't been ready to do that yet. This is my channel where I talk mostly about knitting. It's where I share about my crafting life. This is something I'm very passionate about, and I started it for a couple of reasons. Last October, which is when I started this channel, I began a new job where I was no longer in an office across town. I was working from home, and I still am, and it was a little bit lonely, so it helped to have this outlet to talk about my favorite hobby. The second reason is that, like many enthusiastic hobbyists, I could go on and on and on about knitting and yarn and patterns and festivals and all the things that go with that particular hobby. And honestly, most of the people around me couldn't care less. And so this is an outlet for me. It's a way for me to get that out into the world without being annoying to my family and friends who maybe aren't so passionate about knitting. So for today, I have some finished objects, several works in progress, and I've got one book that I'm going to talk about. I want to be upfront about a couple of things. One is that I do bring in social and political commentary sometimes. I try to keep that confined to when there is something really important going on or when it feels very relevant to a project that I have. Nobody likes when you go on and on and on about that kind of stuff, but I really feel that the personal and the political intersect in many ways, and it's important to me to be very open about that. Secondly, I don't do a whole lot of live chit chat generally. I do have 2 teenage children and a husband, and I feel like their lives are their business, and I don't necessarily like to bring that business here. So sometimes I talk about them, but I don't necessarily feel like I need to be newsy or update people on those aspects of my life necessarily, unless it's relevant to knitting, which it sometimes is. So I actually have a music stand here with some notes so I don't forget anything. Oh, one other thing. I'm gonna have to do this video in segments. So because I have somewhere I need to leave for in about 20 minutes, and I know I have more than 20 minutes of things to talk about. So this is the first part. Part 2, I don't know where I'll film that. So it will be in pieces. So that will be something to look forward to. All right. So let's see. I think the first thing I would like to show you is this hat. If you watched my previous episode, you will recall that I began knitting this actually at a political event. It was a fundraiser for an organization that supports abortion care and access, and it was hosted by a couple of local politicians, Assembly Rep Francesca Hong. She doesn't represent me, she's in a different district, but I was invited to go, so I went, and also Mandela Barnes, who is our lieutenant governor and running for Senate, and I really, really hope he beats Ron Johnson, because Ron Johnson is just, I would say he's a joke, but people like him are actually very dangerous. Anyway, I won't go on anymore about that, but I started this hat as a way to keep my hands busy through all the chit chat and question and answer and stuff that was happening. And I finally finished it a couple weeks later. I did not use a pattern. It's just from my own head. It's 1x1 rib. It's using yarn left over from mittens that I made for my daughter ages and ages ago when she was really little. I asked her if she would like the hats and she said yes. So I think she's gonna keep it, even though it's purple and she's kind of like she does not like pink at all and she's kind of iffy on purple, but I guess she likes this well enough to keep it. The yarn, I've lost the label, but it's Mountain Colors, some kind of 100% worsted weight wool. It's really, really nice. You can see that there's some variegation in it. And of course the hat is nice and long and the 1x1 rib makes it very stretchy. So you can wear it over your head and fold up the cuff. And it's a nice, cozy way to keep your head warm in the winter. I don't think I have anything more to say about this. I'm gonna call it my share of the table hat because it was the event where I started it is called Share the Table. So that is finished object number 1. The only other finished object I have is kind of a big one. This is dun, 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 my Buffalo Rose tee. I finally finished it. It was kind of stagnating for a while, and I talked about that in other episodes, but I'll go over that again. I still haven't taken any photos of the finished object because it's very warm outside and the sweater is very warm wool, so I just haven't put it on to take photos. But first I want to show the magic of blocking. This part, this color work part, which is why I wanted to make it. It's this big buffalo plaid overlaid with roses. So for this whole part, there was 3 colors at a time. There were really long floats. It was a big pain. It's worsted weight wool, so it's gonna be super warm, especially around the trunk. Once I blocked it, I mean, it looked pretty cool before, but once I blocked it, man, it just got, I don't know, it just looks a lot neater, cleaner, smoother, more even. It's amazing what blocking will do. So the original pattern, I made some modifications that, you know, so I made some modifications to the original pattern, which I've talked about in previous episodes. The first was that it seemed to me that there were way too many stitches for the sleeves. On me, at least, and I didn't see this in any of the tester photos or others that have been shared, but on me, those sleeves would have really ballooned out, which is not what I wanted. That's not really my style. So I cast on fewer stitches for the sleeves. One clue that this might be an issue with the design is that she charts out pretty specifically exactly how the decreases work, because there's a different rate of decreases along the sleeve line as along the body for the front and back. And there were so many more decreases for the sleeves than for the front and back. I wondered if that was a design issue. I'm just not sure. The second issue was with the neck. I talked about this at length before, but in the original design, you do the decreases up to a certain point and then just knit some ribbing for the neck so it's the same front and back and it's just sort of this funnel. I don't like when sweaters are designed that way because it feels like the neck is too high in the front and too low in the back. I just find that really annoying and I don't think it looks very nice. So I tried doing some short rows, but that really wasn't enough to lift the back enough and lower the front. So I ripped that out and I ended up binding off some of the front stitches in the middle, continuing the decreases, just going back and forth instead of in the round. Then I bound it all off because I didn't want it to be too stretchy and floppy. And then I picked up the stitches all around the neckline and did a 1x1 rib. I had a few decreases also because I didn't want it to gap. And I think it worked out. I actually think I might have done a little too much, but I haven't decided yet. So there's one last end that's still waiting to be hidden. And I think what I'll do now actually is put the sweater on. I think I can only wear it for about a minute before it's going to be too hot. But maybe if you have a look at the neck, you all can help me decide if it's good or if I need to make it a little bigger. So it's pretty close fitting. It's a pretty close fitting crew this way. I think it kind of has a vintage look. And you know, the more I look at it, the more I think I like it, and I'm gonna leave it. But you can see how this fits. Nice long sleeves. I wouldn't want them any roomier. There's no shaping here that would have, I don't know how that would have worked with the color work, but that's fine because it's like it fits me, but it's not so body hugging that it warps the pattern. And I'm really happy with how this turned out. I'm looking forward to wearing it when it cools down. In fact, I'm already kind of hot, so give me a second. All right, on to works in progress. The first one is something that I shared several episodes ago as a finished object, but it turns out I need to make some adjustments. So last spring, this past spring, I made a sweater for my dad for his birthday, and he was thrilled to get it. It's the Jones cardigan from Tin Can Knits, and I sent it to him. He tried it on for about 1 minute because it was April in Kentucky where they live, and it was way too hot for him to keep wearing. But when he tried it on, it was clear that the sleeves were way too long. The fit was really nice around. He liked the shawl collar of it, but the sleeves came like to the tip of his fingers. And my dad is not a person who likes to roll up the cuffs. So I said, why don't you bring it when we meet? We had a kind of a small family get together a few weeks ago. I said, why don't you bring it? I will bring some needles to fix it for you, and then you can take it home. Well, he remembered to bring his sweater to the get together, but I had been so swamped with work and other stuff that I forgot to bring needles to fix it. So he got a good laugh out of that because obviously in August you don't need a wool cabled cardigan, not in Kentucky. So he packed it up in a stuff sack and sent it back with me, and I'm going to show you my plan, what I'm going to do. So this is the Jones cardigan. If you didn't see those episodes or need a refresher, it's a really nice pattern. It's huge. This one is like enormous on me because my dad is a tall dude, but it's bottom up in one piece. There's this simple cable pattern that alternates with panels of moss stitch. There's a drop shoulder, so you bind off and sew together the shoulder seams. I did a 3 needle bind off, and then you pick up and knit the sleeves in the round down to the cuff. Then you pick up approximately 1,000 million stitches around the collar and do the shawl collar. So the handy thing about having done the sleeves from the shoulder down to the cuff is that when I made them too long, it's going to be really easy for me to just rip back to a certain point and knit the cuff to be shorter. So what I had him do was try it on and fold up the sleeves to a length that he wanted, where it came down far enough on his wrist but wouldn't ride up. And I put in 2 stitch markers. So this shows you how much I need to adjust this sleeve. So this stitch marker here is where he wants the sleeve to end. I mean, this is past even the ribbing, right? So I have all this ribbing on the cuff, and I'm gonna have to rip, well, this is where the sleeves needs to end. And then this marker is where the ribbing should start. So what I'm gonna do, I marked it on one sleeve, and what I'm gonna do is fix the other sleeve first using these markers as a reference. I meant to get started on this before I even did another episode, but I just haven't. So I will have this sleeve as a reference, and I will shorten the other one first, and at that point I'll be able to count the cables and figure out exactly how much to pull out on the sleeve that is marked to get that cuff at the right length. And then I think what I'll do is just send it back to him, because we don't plan to see my parents again until Christmas, and he might want to wear the sweater before then. So that is what's up with that. So this is like sort of a finished object, sort of a work in progress. It's all very fluid, right? Now, I have several other works in progress, and I think I can show you maybe let's start with socks. So the first pair of socks I'm going to show you, there's not a whole lot to say. There's not a whole lot that's terribly interesting about these, except that I have progressed. So these are self-striping, as you can see. I'm using Knitpicks Felici in the color Red Rocks. This is very reasonably priced yarn from Knitpicks. I don't always like all of their yarn, but I do like Felici. I think the colors are really fun, and I think it's nice and soft, and it holds up pretty well. For self-striping socks, even though usually my preference is to do a gusset and heel flap, I almost always do a short row heel. Sometimes I'll do the afterthought, but short row is like even easier. So here's the first one, and I've started the second, and as you can see, the stripes don't quite line up, which doesn't really bother me particularly. But the issue I'm having is that I finished this sock, pulled the ends through the toe, cut the yarn and everything, and then when I tried it on again, I discovered that it is just a wee bit too small for my foot. It fits around really nicely, but I could have used maybe a ½ inch more in length on the foot before starting the heel. Before starting the toe. And for some reason, there are a few things in knitting that I hate more than ripping out the toe of a sock and making it longer and having to join the yarn and everything. I just find that really annoying, even though it really shouldn't be that big of a deal. So I'm stymied a little bit, because if I really want to keep these socks for myself, I'll need to make the toe longer. But I could just find somebody with a slightly smaller foot who would appreciate a pair of hand knit socks and give it to them. I do have one friend of mine who loves whenever I give her hand knit things, and her feet are smaller than mine, and I made her a pair of socks for her birthday once and she loved them. So if I can bring myself to believe that these colors aren't too outlandish for her, I don't know if they are, then I might give them to her. But because of that, I've kind of stalled out on this one, because I want to know how long to make the toe. Should I make the toe to match this sock, or am I gonna have to lengthen to fit me? I just haven't decided. It's just a pair of socks. They'll get finished. It's not a big deal. I have to take a break now because I've got somewhere I need to be, but I will return later and finish section 2 and share the rest of what I'm working on. All right, I'm back. It's time for part 2. I neglected in my finished object segment to state the designer and company of the Buffalo Rose tee. That sweater was designed by Carol Chan of KC Knitting Co. And I put links to absolutely everything that I can in the description box below the video. So I include Ravelry links, and when possible, if there are links to another website, because I know some people can't use Ravelry, then I include those as well, usually Etsy or individual websites or what have you. So my next work in progress is another sock. This is one that's been going for a while. And it's because it's my own design. I don't even know that it's particularly original, but I do want to write it up as a pattern. I don't yet know if I want to charge money for it, but it's just taking a while because I'm stewing over all that in my head and trying to figure out how to write it up, and I don't know, it's just going slow. But shortly before I started recording, I got through the heel flap, so I thought I would show you here. So what I really like about this is the way it's very symmetrical and balanced, and the way the lines flow through. So another reason this is taking a while is because I feel like it's not showing up very well in this yarn for some reason, but I do have a faux cable pattern running down these two sides of the top of the sock, and they will continue all the way down the foot. On the back side, once you get past the one by ribbing of the cuff, I have a garter rib just along the back, so that will hug the foot nicely. Those lines of knit stitches continue on to the heel flap as slip stitches, and like all of my heel flaps, I have 3 garter stitches, or a garter ridge of 3 stitches wide, and I apologize for this focusing issue. Wow, it's really bad. So I like doing that garter ridge because I find it much easier to pick up stitches when I am picking up for the gusset. So one of the reasons I wanted to share about this is because it's been a while since I've talked about it, and I have worked on it, and I do still plan to write it up. It's taking me ages. So there were a few people who have commented on previous episodes that you'd be willing to test knit, and I really appreciate that. I hope you weren't like expecting that to come down the pike soon, because it's going to be a little while. I think what I need to do is just set some deadlines for myself. Like just decide 1 week I'm going to write up the instructions to the best that I can and go from there. So I need to finish at least one sock because I need to take some really careful gauge measurements. I admit that that's kind of backwards. I didn't do a gauge swatch first. I want to write it up for different weights and sizes, so I need to do a couple different prototypes. I definitely need to find a tech editor. I've had one viewer send me a message with a recommendation for somebody he's used, so I really appreciate that, and when I'm ready, I will get in contact with that person. So I think it needs to be looked at by a tech editor. I need to write it, and then I need to have a tech editor go over it before I'm even ready to think about test knitters and how to manage that. So thank you for your patience. If you've lost interest, that is totally understandable. But that's where I am with this one. I wish that this little faux cable thing showed up better. I'm not sure why it kind of gets lost. I don't know if it's it showed up really nicely in the first pair that I made for my friend almost a year ago now. So maybe it's something about the way the yarn is dyed, or maybe it's something about the way the plies hide texture. There's some things about yarn construction that I don't understand very well, so I don't know. Plus, this is not yarn that you can find. It's yarn that I got ages and ages ago and dyed myself with Kool-Aid, so I can't even say this is like recommended for this pattern. So I'm gonna have to knit up a prototype in something that's actually available, and yeah, there's just like a whole lot that goes into designing a sock, as it turns out. So that's where I am with that. Now, Next work in progress. I started this just on Monday, I think. I finished one sweater and decided it was time to start another. This is one that I have been wanting to make for a really long time. And I'm going to show you the pattern first because what I have knit so far isn't a whole lot to look at. It is called Epistrophe, and it's by Davies. She's a Scottish designer. She also designed paper dolls, which I made a few months ago. So if you've been watching my channel for a little while, you'll have seen my process for that. It's from the book Yokes. I believe you can also buy it as an individual pattern on Ravelry or on her website. So I'll have links to all that stuff too. But this is a book that she published, I think it might be about 10 years old. Let me see if I can find a copyright. No, I don't see one, although I'm sure it's somewhere. One of the ways that you know it's an older pattern of hers is that it's not as size inclusive as her current patterns. I believe this one only goes up to about a 52-inch chest, which is not considered size inclusive these days. Most patterns now, if they're considered size inclusive, go at least up to a 60-inch circumference, if not bigger. And I think all of her patterns she's come out with in the last few years do. I don't know if she'll ever update this one. I suppose it depends on if it's something enough people want to knit to make it worth it. Anyway, what I really, really like about that sweater is that color work design around the top. I just think it's really beautiful. Now, it is a steeked design, and I've only done one other steek before in my life, and I'm going to show it to you here in a minute. But first, I'll just show you the yarn I'm using. Here's what I've got so far. It's a natural colored. Here's where my steek stitches are, by the way. You can see at the bottom where there's just plain stockinette here. My yarn, oh, I wish I had a label. I do have a label. I bought this in Stevens Point at the Wisconsin Wool Exchange to go with this lovely yarn that I also bought at the Wisconsin Wool Exchange. I've had to go to Stevens Point a couple of times for work, and I'll be going back again yet this fall. So the first time I bought this yarn, which is like hand dyed, hand spun Corriedale. It's beautiful. It was a little pricey, but I could not pass it up because I just loved all those earthy tones, and I loved the feel of it. I like the smell of it. The shop has kind of this, you know, herby, spicy smell. And I brought it home, and then I realized I didn't really have anything in my stash to go with it that was like appropriate color and weight and stuff. So when I had to go back to Stevens Point a few months later, I went back to the shop, and with that in mind, I picked up 4 skeins of Shetland DK weight. I don't know how many plies, 3 ply. It's in a cream color, and it's from this Rose Boulder farm. There we go. And I think Shetland can really vary quite a lot in how soft or how rough it is, even on one sheep. So I wasn't, you know, I spent a lot of time like rubbing it on my neck and rubbing it on the inside of my wrist, you know, sort of those places where your skin's a little more sensitive. And it's not the softest yarn ever, but I don't think it's all that scratchy. Plus I'm making a cardigan out of it, so it'll be going over something else. And it looks like it's going to be really sturdy, hard wearing yarn. So I'm very pleased with how it looks knitted up. I think once it's blocked, it will even out quite a lot. but you can see that it is a warm cream color that will go very nicely with this. So this is what I will use for the color work at the top. Now I want to talk about the construction of this, because I've talked about how I really don't like making sweaters bottom up, especially with the color work yoke design, because I hate the awkwardness of the join, and I don't like how difficult it is to see if it fits until you're almost all the way done with it. However, so what I have done, like what I did with the paper doll sweater, and what I would do in the future with a color work yoke sweater generally, is do a provisional cast on, knit the yoke from the top or from the bottom up, undo the provisional cast on, and then finish it top down so that it's easier to check for fit. Also, if you're worried about how much yarn you have left, it's a little easier to weigh it out or whatever, so you don't run out halfway through your second sleeve. But since this is a steeked design, I just wasn't really sure if that interruption that happens where you pick up from a provisional cast on, if that was going to be a problem with the steeking. Maybe it wouldn't be, but I've only done one other steeked project, and it had kind of an unusual, I used kind of an unusual method for dealing with the yarn once you cut it. So just being unsure of that, I decided to go ahead and just follow the pattern as it's constructed. One change I will make is, instead of starting the sleeves at the cuff and going all the way to the underarm and then joining everything, I do plan to do that provisional cast on and pick up for the yoke. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, because I think it will make the yoke join a little less awkward if I don't have the sleeves hanging down. And two, this Shetland yarn was, it's locally produced and locally spun, so it was not inexpensive, and I got just enough for the sweater. I don't think I'll have a problem with running out, but just in case I did, I would rather figure out some kind of contrasting cuff maybe out of this, because I think this skein is far more than I'm going to need for the color work. There will probably be a lot left over, so I could use this for the cuffs if I was running out of the cream. So that's another reason, because it'll be a little easier to manage that if the rest of the whole thing is done and then I do the sleeves very last. So that's my reasoning behind that. Now, I'm gonna go get the other steeked project and show you how I did that. Speaking of very warm sweaters, this is the warmest sweater I own. There's no way I can even try it on for you. This is the Bindroon cardigan. It's from an issue of Pom Pom magazine from a few years ago. And I knit it out of Let Lopi, which is what it called for. And the original pattern, you see it's a cardigan. The original pattern has you knitting back and forth for the entire body, including this color work. And when I saw that in the instructions, I thought to myself, oh hell no, I'm not doing that. Especially since you also have color work on the cuffs and that's done in the round. That just didn't make sense to me. So what I decided to do was to cast on enough stitches for the bottom of the sweater. Now this all took a couple of tries, and I won't go into all the details of construction because I actually made a lot of modifications, so I'll just tell you about the bottom. I cast on enough stitches for the bottom of the sweater, plus I forget how many extra, maybe 10 extra. No, what I did, actually, let me go back and correct myself. I cast on as many as it called for the bottom ribbing. And then when it was time to start the color work, I joined in the round, and at that point also cast on a bunch of extra stitches in the middle for steeking that's what I did. And I worked the color work up until I was done with the color work. Then I cut the steek and just kept going back and forth following the pattern then as usual. Now for the steeking itself, this is a method that I learned from Susan B. Anderson. It's on her blog somewhere. I'll find the link and make sure it's there in the description box. But instead of reinforcing with a crochet chain or stitching it with a sewing machine, there's all these different methods you can do for reinforcing a steek. But the way she did it was, I think, to drop the stitches, drop all of those steek stitches in the middle, unravel them down, and then cut them. So you've got, several inches from those unraveled stitches just hanging out there, floating free. And Lopi yarn is so woolly and sticky, there was no chance it was gonna ravel. And when you have drop stitches, they're not gonna ravel this way. They just ravel on the way down. So then what I did, and this was fairly painstaking, is you take pairs of those ends and knot them all the way up the length of where you've cut. And then I wove in the ends. Obviously I didn't cut them short, but you can see here's where they end, and I just wove them in on the inside of the sweater. So that was my steeking method for this. I'm not sure what I'll do for the epistrophe. I'll find some instructions or tutorial online. I don't have to worry about it till I'm done with the whole thing, because the whole thing is steeked, not just not just one little section. So that will be a fun adventure, I'm sure. I don't know if you can hear that chirping. Outside, we have this chipmunk that I think lives under the porch that is just always going at it. And I don't know if he's angry or cheerfully singing or frightened about something, but generally he gets going like early in the morning and keeps it up for quite a while. So that's what that noise is all about, in case you can hear it. So that's my epistrophe sweater. I'm pretty excited about that. I will have to go back up to Stevens Point again this fall, at least one more time for work. And I'm hoping that I have the sweater done so I can stop in the shop where I bought the yarn and show the lady what I made, because the owner of that shop is seems like such a lovely, nice person. I overheard her telling a customer last time I was there that she lives on Social Security. Her shop basically brings in just enough money to keep running. It doesn't really pay her that much. And she's got so many locally produced yarns in there. It's really, really a neat place to look around. She also does a lot of spinning, so there's tons of wool, roving and stuff, if that's what you're into. But I'm trying not to buy yarn. I want my stash to get smaller, but I didn't feel bad about this because of who I was buying it from and the fact that it was locally produced. And so anyway, that's Epistrophe. Okay, my last work in progress is unremarkable in and of itself, but there's a story behind it. So here's where my life chit-chat interacts with my knitting. So if you've been watching, y'all know that this summer in particular, I've been making a whole lot of hats, a lot of 1x1 rib beanies, many of them using leftover sock yarn, trying to use up some of these leftovers, and this is no exception. I think this is Leading Men Fiber Arts. It's their sock yarn. Can't remember the name of it. I don't know the colorway, lost the label. Lather, rinse, repeat. And it's pretty cool how it's coming out with the circumference of a hat. It's basically striping. I don't even remember what the socks look like. I think they were pooling more than striping. But this is what I've got so far. Now I started knitting this hat in the office waiting for a doctor appointment, because it looks like, well, I'm scheduled to have my gallbladder removed in a few weeks, which is a pretty routine thing. It's not uncommon for women my age. And anyway, I was sort of nervous waiting for that appointment to meet with a surgeon. So I started a hat because I knew it would be easy and mindless. But most of this knitting actually happened last weekend. I participated in this event, this huge bike ride called Ride Across Wisconsin. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen my posts recently. I've been training for this for several months. I had never done anything like this before. I am not athletic. I try to stay fit and healthy, but I am not an athlete. I never considered myself an endurance athlete, but for some reason, it seemed like a good idea to sign up for this ride. So there were different options for how far you wanted to go, and I signed up for the option. This was one of the easiest options. That was 100 miles the first day and 65 miles the second day. So last Friday, I loaded up my bike on the car. My husband drove me up to the train station that's about an hour north of here. I took the train all the way to La Crosse, which is on the west side of the state. It's on the Mississippi River. Saturday morning at 5 a.m., 700 riders left the starting line. And that day I biked 100 miles to the Wisconsin Dells, where I got there 9.5 hours after beginning. So that was a better time than I was expecting to make. And I had the rest of the afternoon and the evening to rest up and chill and wait for the ride the second day. And the second day was 65 miles. It was almost as difficult as the first day because I was tired from the day before. The worst hills were the second day. Oh my God. Wisconsin is beautiful, beautiful in some spots. And I think we were biking through the nicest parts of it, but pretty also can mean hilly, and it was formidable. But anyway, Saturday, I arrived like mid-afternoon. I had to get to my hotel. I wanted to find something to eat, and I did go to bed really, really early that night. But I also had some time just to kind of hang around and rest and, watch YouTube or whatever. So I got quite a bit of knitting done on this hat while I was resting up on Saturday during the ride across Wisconsin. And I also did some knitting on the train on the way out there on Friday. But I think that's pretty cool. I, never thought I could do it, and I did it. I had never ridden a full 100 miles before, so that was my first century. I don't know if I'll do it again. Mostly because it just takes so much time to do all the training, but I had a good time and I met a lot of really great people. It turns out that these endurance events that are not races, there was no competition. There are a lot of really cool, interesting, supportive people that you can meet along the way. So I had a good time with that. So who knows when this will get done? This is like plain socks. These hats are the kind of thing that I work on intermittently when I'm waiting or in a meeting or need something to keep my hands busy without too much thought. So that's the category this falls under. But this is my hat, or a hat that I am making. That is, I believe, that is all the knitting that I have finished. That is all the knitting that I'm working on. I do have a couple of future projects to talk about. I usually don't talk about future knitting because you never know if I'm actually going to get around to it. But these are two things that I am definitely going to do, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about. So the first is that one of my really good friends from high school, who I've managed to keep up with more or less for the last several years, lives in Texas. And she asked me to make her an F-bomb. She sent me a message asking if I would make her an F-bomb, and I said, sure, because she's an incredible person. She has come through a lot of trauma in her life, and she is a teacher and just is an amazing person and is totally worthy of anything I want to make. But anyway, so I was like, okay, I'll make an F-bomb, but have you found a pattern or anything? So she sent me a link, and then I did a search on Ravelry for F-bomb, like F-bomb, and there were 4 patterns available that were all pretty similar. Different weights of yarn, different recommendations for stuffing, but all sort of along the same line. So here's a free one that I downloaded. I will link all of them in the description box. But I mean, literally, it's like a ball that you stuff and duplicate stitch an F on. You could also cross stitch it or embroider it. And then you have a little bit of cream yarn in there for the fuse. So I know there's at least one pay for pattern, maybe 2. I haven't exactly decided which one to use. This one I think is like DK or worsted weight, and I've got a whole bunch of this charcoal yarn left over from a sweater I made for my brother, and I think this would work fine. So I'm gonna make 1 or more F-bombs for Jen in San Antonio. And I need to get on that because her school year has started, and I'm sure she could use these. It's like a stress ball thing. The second project that I'm anticipating is that mystery gnome make-along that Sarah Schira has planned for this fall. I've already purchased the pattern, so I've downloaded the sort of pre-knitting instructions. Like, I don't know, there's a whole document that kind of explains, without giving too much away, she'll explain like how much yarn you need, how many colors, how big it's going to turn out to be depending on what size you pick. This one, you've got different options for weights of yarn and I think different sizes. So I'm going to make whatever the smaller option is, and I'm going to use worsted weight yarn, and I think I'll get maybe about a 16-inch gnome. I think that's about what we'll get. So you need 50 grams each of 3 colors. And I have like a huge tub full of worsted weight yarn. I don't even know where it's all from. I mean, I know that a lot of things are left over from projects. Like if I knit a sweater, I'll have a ball left over or a partial ball left over. I think I've got 1 sweater quantity in there from something my mom gave me. But other than that, it's just like leftovers or single skeins that I got and used just a little bit of, or maybe not at all. So not knowing what this thing looks like, it was actually kind of hard to pick out colors because I don't really know. I think I want enough contrast that everything will show up. I do know that I want a cream color for the beard. I was thinking either cream or light gray, and I think I like cream. It's probably more than I'm gonna need. It's kind of bright. This is on the warm side of cream. So that was easy enough. But the other colors, I'm just kind of dithering about. I have some oranges and some golds, but the ones I was really drawn to are these. So I have brown. This is a color that my dad would refer to as dog food brown. It really looks to me like tree bark, or, like when mushrooms go slimy, but I like it. I think it goes well with this cream. I also picked out these blues, and now that I look at them, I can't tell if they're the same yarn or not. I just grabbed enough that it would be at least 50 grams. So there's this blue. It's kind of a heathery, leaning towards greenish a little bit blue. I picked out this very heathery maroonish purple color. And I picked out this very mossy green. This is the kind of green that I tend to gravitate toward. I think it's really close to the color of my eyes. So anyway, but what I can't decide is what colors would look best together. I kind of like this, the brown and the cream and the blue. I think I like this. It's very earthy, but depending on how close the brown and the green are going to be together, there's not very much contrast there. So, gosh, I guess I haven't looked through the document very carefully. If there's color work, this would definitely not work as color work. But I think just put together, you know, like if this was a hat and this was the body or the other way around, I think it would work. And then this is nice and bright, you know, like what if I had the blue, and I don't know if I like that. So that's a possibility. Whoops. You know, I even like this actually. That seems like fall leaf colors. Like there are some leaves that actually get purplish like that, and so I haven't totally decided, but I don't think the first clue comes out until a week from today, until next Friday. So I've got a little time to mull over it yet and maybe look over the preparation PDF a little more carefully. So if any of y'all out there are planning to knit this mystery gnome, I would be really interested to see what colors you've chosen or what yarn you've chosen, because this is the first time I've done anything like this, and I think it'll be fun. Like I said last time, it's really hard to go wrong with a gnome. It's not something I'm gonna wear. It's just something I'll have sitting around for fun. So we shall see. I know that this is running long. I haven't made a video in 3 weeks. I didn't mean for these pauses to go so long, but I've had a lot going on, a little bit of medical stuff. That bike ride was a huge time suck because of all the time I spent training. Plus, work has been really busy and school starts next week. So I've had like kids around and been running them around sometimes when I need to. And anyway, hopefully I'll be able to do a video every other week, a little more regularly from here on out, and they won't be so long. But I did, just because it's been so long since I have shared anything about what I'm reading, I did want to talk about something I'm reading because I'm actually enjoying it. This is a new book. It's called Two Wheels Good: The History and Mystery of the Bicycle. And it's by Jody Rosen, who I think is a journalist. I've heard him interviewed on the radio and a couple of podcasts, and thought that it would be really interesting to read this book. I do a lot with biking and bike infrastructure for work, so that was another reason that I thought it would be a good read. And I've had it for several weeks and it's already really overdue at the library, so I need to like get on it and finish it. But this is not just the history of the bicycle. I think a lot is out there already about the history of the bicycle and like who invented what and what technological innovations came along when. Every chapter more or less stands on its own because he'll go to a different place in the world or to a different place in time in history and just talk about what was going on and just all these oddities. There's a whole chapter where he talks about like the history of circus animals on bikes, which is horrible. I can't imagine treating animals that way. And the crazy human tricks that people have done and the determined mountain bikers that do all these really challenging courses and races and stuff. I just finished a chapter about the country of Bhutan, where the king is a very enthusiastic biker and the entire country is mountainous. So biking in Bhutan means biking on hills. And it's really, really interesting. I recommend it with one caveat. Now I'm only about halfway through, but as I read through it, I have noticed that when he features on someone, like all of the people that are close features in his book are men. Women are mentioned sometimes. The bicycle apparently played a really important role in the suffragist movement because it was a way for women to experience freedom and getting around. And they would wear bloomers instead of dresses, and that was very shocking, and there was all this moral panic about it. But, you know, other than sort of passing mention of generally the role of women in a particular time, or just really briefly mentioning a woman biker, most of the like really focused feature writing of individuals has been on men. Now I'm only halfway through, so he may redeem himself, but I have to believe, in fact, I know that there are remarkable women bikers out there that absolutely could have had a place in this book. So we'll see. You know, jury's still out. Like I said, I've still got about half of it to go, but just be aware of that when you're reading. He doesn't, you know, there's no like disrespectful language. It's just like, seems to be kind of missing. That said, you can tell that this guy is a really talented journalist because he just knows how to tell a really good story. It's beautifully written. It's very engaging. I don't know why it's taking me so long to read it. I just have not had the capacity to do a lot of reading lately. I don't know why. I guess it's just stress and overwhelm and what have you. Just not having the mental space for it. But Two Wheels Good by Jody Rosen. It's a really interesting read. I would recommend it for entertainment, if nothing else. That's all I have to share today. Thank you for sticking with me this far. I will tack on the end of this video for anyone who cares to watch sort of a slideshow of a few of the pictures I took while I was on that ride last weekend. I could not take pictures while I was riding. Some people can, so I don't have a ton of pictures, but there are a few little clips and photos that document how things were along the way. So if you want to watch that, keep watching. Otherwise, thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Line for the bike washing station after 55 miles of sloppy, muddy, unpaved trail.